Linda's General Store, $1.89.
The jorts route intersects the pants route, and what we are calling the hem.
Unbridled success.
We're back with DIRTCAST episode 3. We got Maggie Livelsburger, single speed bikepacking legend from Erie, Pennsylvania. Done races all over the country and only brings one gear. Maggie, thanks for joining us. Appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is fun.
Cool. So, I wanted to really start with a question that I've been asking people lately, and it's interesting to get different answers. But I don't think it's any secret that your life kind of revolves around bikes to a certain extent, but it couldn't have always been that way. So I just wanted to kind of hear your bike story, right? Like, when did you start riding a bike more than just, a kid riding around town, to when that became something that you were like, this is something that's really a big part of my life now?
Yeah. After college, I lived in Philly and DC for a while. And so I bike commuted, and that was kind of the only way it existed, was for transportation. And then in 2019, I moved to Erie. And there is not really a whole lot to do here. So I started riding my bike around just to learn my way around. And it kind of went from there. It was just more exploring. And then I realized I was really kind of enjoying riding it around. I Strava stalked some people and forced them to be friends with me, and started gravel riding more and learning the area. And actually, that same friend was the first person to convince me to jump into a race, which I hadn't really given a lot of thought to. And I guess I just never looked back after that. So, and then bikepacking, that was sort of an Instagram interest culmination. In 2019, in the fall, I watched learned about dot watching, and I watched the Arkansas High Country race. And that was, I think, the year that Ted King rode, and Ashley Kerlock was the first female that had finished the race. And I remember looking at it and was like, oh, I think I could do that. And it sort of became my obsession after that, was everything I could think about bikepacking. I backpacked a couple of times earlier in life, but I don't know. There was just something about that race and about the idea of getting into it that seemed really cool. So that was kind of it. And COVID hit and had plenty of time to do long rides. And yeah, I guess that's sort of where it happened.
And it's funny because long rides is, that's kind of how I first had heard your name. I'd seen, people posting about you on Instagram, and you were out doing these long, like, multi-day rides, but you weren't really stopping a whole lot, right? You're just kind of riding through the night. And I'm curious as to how you built up to that, because it sounds to me like you just saw that race and you were like, yeah, I could probably do that. But was there a point where you were like, maybe I shouldn't ride through the night, and then you built up to that? Or were you just like, I'm just going to send it?
I think it was kind of, I'm just going to send it. The first race I ever did, I think it was like 35 miles. It was a gravel race, and I flatted 3 times, crashed 2 miles from the end, and was like covered in blood coming out of the woods, and got to the end of it. And I was like, all right, well, everything bad that could go wrong went wrong. So it's all good from here. And then the next race I signed up for was actually, because a friend of mine encouraged me to do it, was Mammoth Gravel Endurance the first year. I think the first year we ended up was like 126 or 128 miles with, I don't even know what the elevation was. I mean, that's a big elevation day. And I rode that. I'm like, I think I love climbing. And so I started looking for bigger and bigger races. And I think it was that same year, I'm like, I just want to see if I could ride 200 miles. Like, I'm just curious if I can actually do it. And so I went out and rode 200 miles. And then the next year, I did a 200-mile race. And then I think during another race, I'd learned about gravel worlds. And they had a 300-mile race. I'm like, oh, I guess I did 200 miles. I'll try 300 miles. And so that was the first time I'd ridden through the night. And I didn't even think about it going into it. Like, what do I do? Do I sleep? Do I stop? Do I nap? Whatever. I just showed up and went. And so that was my first full through the night ride. And then when I got to high country, I did the South Loop was my first ever bike packing race. So this was 2023. I had absolutely zero plans. I just thought, well, I'll ride my bike till I'm so tired I lay down on the side of the road. Because when you look on Instagram, that's what it looks like everybody does. So that's exactly what I did. And I didn't know anybody. I showed up and just started riding my bike. And I think it was a little after sundown. I was riding with somebody and he's like, well, where are you sleeping? I'm like, well, I don't know. I didn't know to study the map or anything like that. I'm like, I just figured I'd lay down and sleep when I needed to. He's like, all right, well, in like 20 miles, there's a church and I'm going to be there if you feel like you need to stop. And I think it was probably around 2:00 in the morning. And I decided to stop and sleep behind this church. And I don't know, woke up 2 hours later and kept riding. And that was kind of it. It was fun. I listened to Coyotes a bunch and it was kind of creepy and scary, but it was super fun at the same time. And it never bothered me after that, just sort of sleeping wherever I needed to sleep. And so it really became, for me, bike packing wasn't this look at the course and find a hotel or find a safe place to sleep. It was just like, I know where shit is, but go hard and see what happens. And I guess that's kind of how I've gone through everything else.
I kind of got a little bit of firsthand knowledge of that mentality when we got to ride together on the Jorts route. And it is kind of cool to see you operate in that way, right? Like, I'm sure you knew those roads and you've probably ridden out there a bunch. But at the same time, just kind of go and, figure it out and have an adventure along the way. So to me, that was really cool to see, like, you out having an adventure, right? We're all having our own adventures. But at the same time, almost leading the way for a while. And none of us really knew where we were going. We have a GPS. We don't know what's along the way. And you were like, yeah, it's right up here. You're like, we'll be fine. But on that route, it was also the first time I've ridden any kind of distance with someone, on a single speed bike. So I got to ask, did you start that first race that was 35 miles? Was that single speed? Did you say, oh, maybe I had too many gears in this race and I should just, downsize from here? How did that all come about?
It was very organically. No, the first race, second race were on gears. Third race was on gears. So I started doing big climby races and having a lot of gears was really nice for that. And I think it was in 2020 or 21, I can't remember offhand. 2020, I think. I built my commuter bike into a single speed. And I did it, just the weather here is pretty crappy. We get a lot of slush and snow and rain. And that seemed easier maintenance-wise without having to deal with a lot of cleanup. And then I found myself riding that bike more and more. It's just really fun, not having to worry about the gears or the maintenance. And later that year, I was dot watching the high country race, the full loop, and Lindsay Shepherd finished on a single speed. And I was completely blown away by the idea of doing something so big on a single speed. And I think that was only kind of the second introduction that I'd had to single speeding. The third race, I guess, technically I ever did was Funk Bottoms, which is in Ohio. And it's a really, really climby race. I think it was 100 something miles and like 120 miles and, 15,000 feet of climbing, something like that. And I rode with a single speeder for a little while and he just annihilated me on one of these climbs, as much as he could. And then he hopped off, hiked, got back on the bike, and just absolutely kicked the crap out of me, like slow spinning up this hill. And I just thought it was the coolest thing. And he's like, what they don't tell you about single speeding is there's 5 gears, sitting, spinning, standing. I wish I remembered how he said it, because it was the greatest thing ever. If anybody knows, let me know. And it was like pushing, puking. But so I think that kind of like ingrained it in the back of my head. And then, fast forward to watch Lindsay ride. I'm like, that's the coolest thing ever. And I messaged her immediately on Instagram and I just said, congratulations. I'm completely in awe of that effort, like 1,000 miles on one gear. I'm going to sign up for a race single speed. And I signed up for, I think it was a 200-mile race, single speed. And then I never looked back. I never put a gear back on a race bike. I do have a geared bike still, and I do ride it every once in a while, but I don't know. Every time I get on the bike on that single speed, there's just something so organically beautiful about my legs feel like shit. So I'll just walk for a little while, or I'm feeling really good, and just what a gut punch those climbs can be. And I think I kind of fell in love with how the riding made me feel rather than just riding. So
Was there some trial and error on the actual gearing?
oh yeah. Yeah. So I have probably close to a shop's collection of chain rings and cogs out in the garage. And each of my bikes that I set up, the chainstay length is a little bit different and the bike handles just a little bit differently. So there's some gearing I like on one bike versus the other ones. But like race prepping, I use my Strava as what gearing I ran for that race, so I can look back at similar elevation, and I will just get out and try any gearing combination to figure out, what I'm kind of comfortable with, what seems like it might work the best. And I practice really high cadence riding pretty frequently. So I've found that I like to run a little bit spinnier gear, so I can climb more, because that is something I really enjoy. And if I need to on the flats, like I will spin at 110, 115 cadence and do my best to keep up.
Yeah, and I also got to see that firsthand, which was something different for me. I was just struggling to keep up with all of my gears, and I see you spin it away at, like you said, at 115, and I was like, there she is, leading the charge again on the road stretches. And so there's that element of bike packing, right? You have your bike, and you kind of pared that down. You said it is a little bit more organic. It's simplistic. But I also noticed when we were out together that the rest of your setup is as well. That was my first time bike packing. It was not your first time, and I could tell you seemed way more prepared than I was, with way less stuff, and more efficient stuff. So talk to me a little bit about, what your kind of, setup is for, say, like like that 300-mile, like the high country that you were talking about, right? Like, you have your bivy that you brought with us. What's your food look like? What are you packing like?
Yeah. For the shorter stuff, in the bike packing world, the shorter stuff. So like 300-mile, I'm not packing anything. I might have leg warmers and a pair of gloves. Depending on, I'll watch the weather for stuff like that. Grusk was another. That's a 260 miler I did a couple years ago, and that was food and water, and that was it. And I think I had my arm warmers, and that's all I took with me there. So if I know I'm in my head, I want to give it one shot, I will pack myself light enough that I sort of force the issue and have to give it one shot. So I'm a huge Uncrustable fan. That will be, no matter the length of my ride or race, we'll have a pile of Uncrustables. And I will eat anything at a gas station. Cheese pizza. I don't bring a ton of food because I never want what I brought with me. And I live on, Cokes, iced tea, Arnold Palmer's. a lot of liquid calories. That's something that I found works well for me. And trial and error. I'm a dietitian is my full-time job, and I probably do the absolute worst job of managing it on the bike. You know, I'll roll up to a Dollar General and buy a box of like Little Debbie, whatever, and I'll just eat that for 3 hours until my next stop. It doesn't always go well for me, but I'll eat what sounds good, because if I try to force the calories, I usually don't have a lot of luck with that. For gear, I did, let's see, the BT 700 is a 500 something mile race. I packed my summer bivvy, a rain jacket, arm warmers, leg warmers, and rain gloves. And I think that's all I took there. And I have a 3/4 length pad. And that was when I told myself as little sleep as possible. So I think the first night I slept about 2.5 hours. And the second night I did about an hour bivvy. And I probably wouldn't have slept. I started getting a little delirious. There's a single track section that I hit really, really late at night. And I got super disoriented in there. And I ended up finding out in the morning I had done like shoes and socks off, waded in the water, carrying my bike above my head, like thigh deep, about 5 feet from the bridge that I could have ridden right across. I was getting very tired. And so I napped right after I got out of the single track. So that's just a quick bivvy. And then Arkansas High Country, I did take a tarp and bivvy and emergency blanket. I like a bug bivvy. I don't like any that'll have a lot of condensation. So even the gear has been a super trial and error for me. I started out with a like $40 Amazon bivvy and have progressed from there, because I thought I don't want to invest a ton of money into it if I don't like it. And to be honest, I have traveled pretty frequently with that Amazon bivy, because I still love it. And it's actually really great. I have a little bit more space in it. It is waterproof. I've re-waterproofed it a few times, but there is a time and a place for really light, expensive stuff. But I think what I found is it's really not necessary if you are packing the right stuff. I will go super light on clothing. It's gross, but I wore the same bibs all 7 days when I did the high country, and just like washed them out in a hotel. And same with my shirt, which is pretty gross, but I had more space for gear then, so I could take a little bit bigger and or heavier along those lines. And I infrequently bring a sleeping bag, mostly to my detriment.
I don't think bike packing is synonymous with hygiene, and I think that's okay for a 1-week trip.
I think that's what everybody likes about it so much. Like, let's be honest, you don't have to shower and you can laugh about it.
You don't have to care about anything but getting to your next point.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned something.
Brush your teeth and you're good.
Some people do, some people don't. You had are you there? All right, I thought I lost you. You had mentioned something before we move on to the Tour Divide. I have to ask because I got this question last year at Unpaved. We had shown the Pants documentary, and when we got out, there was a couple that was outside, and they were asking us, why are you eating all of that trash food? Why don't you eat, fruits and vegetables and try to keep a clean diet? And my response was kind of the same as yours of, that's what I want at the time, and we just need as many calories as possible. But from someone who's more of a professional in the field, what would your, answer to that be? And would it be more beneficial to eat clean while you're on the bike?
I think it's twofold. So I'll answer from the dietitian perspective. Yeah, everybody would benefit from eating better.
Of course.
And off the bike. From the bike packer realistic point of view, I don't eat a lot of fruits and vegetables on the bike because it's a lot of fiber. And when you're that dehydrated, which is kind of par for the course, particularly for racing, a lot of fiber and dehydration do not pair well on the bowel region. And it's really uncomfortable. So that's one. But exactly like you said, I mean, honey bun is going to have 410 calories with a ton of carbohydrates. And that's what your body needs when you're putting in that much effort and working that hard. You really need that quick burning fuel. And it's easiest to find it in junk food, and you digest it a lot more quickly. So it's easier to get a lot more of it in over a shorter amount of time.
Perfect. There you have it from a professional. Just eat trash.
Yes.
Um, so right, you're bike packing for not that long, I guess, in the sense of like a cycling career. And this past year, you decide, all right, I'm going to go out and I'm going to give the Tour Divide a shot. Right. So is that something that's been in the back of your head for a while? Is it something that, like you said earlier, right, you just thought, I'm just going to go do it, and it kind of, you know, came up and you said, I'll train it forward and do it? Or, you know, how did that even come about in your plans?
Um, it hadn't been on like a long-term radar or short-term radar for me really when I started bike packing, and I sort of had just like picked things that looked fun and tried them out in close proximity because travel is hard and gets expensive. But in 20, I think it was after the high country, the full loop, which is 1,000 miles. I think there was like a natural progression of questions from people that's like, what's next? Are you going to do the Tour Divide? And I really hadn't given it a lot of thought before then. And I had some friends that were talking about doing it. And I guess at that point, I'm like, I guess I could entertain the idea of maybe doing it. And logistically, does it make sense? And do I even have a possibility of getting that much time off from work? And so I think that was a big part of it. And it was probably a good 6 months of mulling it over before finally kind of saying, I think I am going to give this a shot and see what it looks like. Bike packing in general to the like really racing where you're giving up a lot of sleep and time and pushing constantly is so taxing and tiring. I don't know that it's, with having a full-time job, something that is a super long-term part of things or part of the plan for me. So I had kind of thought, this is the biggest race there is. Maybe that's a good way to step away from racing the same way I had. Or maybe it's just a good way to re-experience how much I love doing it in a completely new format. So it was probably June of 24 before I really was like, yeah, I think maybe I'll give it some thought, and started looking into the logistics of it a little bit more in the planning side of things. So it was really more, I had people that I knew that were planning on going, and I kind of jumped on board and thought, the more people I know out there, it'd be really cool to get to experience that with my friends and have the opportunity as a whole. So I really looked at it more as the experience rather than, I mean, I wanted to go and I wanted to race it, but I wanted to take in everything as I went. So.
And how was the experience? Did it live up to what you had thought it would be?
For what I was there for, it did. Yeah, it is definitely harder terrain than I really was expecting. You know, you kind of hear people say like, oh, well, it's, you know, you look at an elevation profile and it's one thing, but there's so many factors that go into looking at the elevation profile of one climb. The heat, the elevation, where you are, the conditions. And I really think for the Canada to Montana is probably the the hardest riding that I've done, but it was absolutely gorgeous. So I think it really did live up to the expectations that I had going into it. I will say that riding at elevation really, really was a lot harder than I was expecting. I kind of thought being in good sea level shape would be helpful. And it obviously is. I spent a couple days ahead of time there, but it was significantly more taxing riding at elevation than I had expected.
I mean, is there anything you can really do, or did you talk to anyone that, also rides around sea level that, they did beforehand other than just going somewhere that is at elevation and training?
I know there's a lot of ultra runners that do those like elevation tents or whatever, in over your bed when you sleep. And I think just traveling a lot more. I have some friends who had done kind of like a training camp earlier than in the year and ride at elevation to have a little bit more of an adjustment, but I'm not sure. I think if I did it again, it would be really nice to have an extra maybe week out there to get adjusted and do a little bit more riding ahead of time.
And speaking of doing it again, right, you kind of alluded to that could have, possibly been your, you know, exit for more or less from, bike racing. Just interested to see what is next for you.
I have absolutely nothing on the calendar right now, which has been
How
really
does
weird. I've
how does
kind
that
of
feel?
spent,
Yeah.
I've spent the last couple of months. Um, have still been riding a lot. I've been running, and I was talking about it with a friend the other day because I realized I have absolutely nothing on the calendar right now, and I said, "This is so I'm just exercising right now, which feels very weird instead of training for something, but it's been enjoyable." I have a couple things that I'd like to look into doing next year. Um, I started a new job recently and I have no vacation time yet, so it's been really hard. I really wanted to do Endless Mountains like 3 weeks ago, but it's like 5.5 hour drive from here, and I would have had to work all day Friday and then be back at work on Monday. So the 4:30 would have been out. I thought about doing the 250, but with 10 hours of driving and zero sleep, it didn't seem like a safe thing for me to go out and do that. And then uh, next month there's the Mountaineer Monster down in West Virginia, and I really wanted to do that. It's 275 miles. And if it was just 275 miles, I probably would go throw down for a weekend because it's only a 3 hour drive from here. But there's like 30,000 feet of climbing. And like might as well bike straight to work at that point on Monday morning. So unfortunately, I won't be doing either of those. But I think I'll probably look at something in that like 500 or under distance to keep doing next year because I've been doing a couple climby days and it is absolutely something I still love. It's still that like switch that I can turn on and just go hard. But I am just not sure quite which one to look at yet. But a whole season of races, I'm sure something will fall into place pretty soon because I like training instead of just exercising.
Yeah. Yes, it is a very different feeling. Like I trained all year for the overalls route. That was over. I was like, what am I even getting out on my bike for? So you almost have to like
Yep.
relearn, right, why you're riding your bike in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a really big thing coming back from the tour. Like I hopped on my geared bike for a while. I did a lot of running and I didn't ride my single speed for a little bit. And then I took it out for a ride and I was like, yes, I have completely fallen back in love with this.
I am so back.
Yeah. So it's nice to have like a little bit of break and do something different and yeah, figure out what's next on it.
Awesome. I can't wait to see what's next regardless. Really appreciate your time today. Been a fun chat. Yeah, maybe I'll see you out there.
Yeah, and maybe next year we'll do like a whole rectangle route around Pennsylvania, and we'll
I'm
just
gonna
all
need
take off a
two
little
weeks
more
off
time
work
for
for
it.
that.
Yeah, we can all swing it.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. Awesome. Thanks so much. Have a good one.
You too. Talk to you later.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Have a good one. You too.